Kuda, thank you for giving me this opportunity to interview you. How significant is religion in your culture?
The significance of religion in my culture is it's very prevalent. I think a lot of people in my country are Christians. So we just believe in Christian values. Um, just be kind to one another. Don't steal. Be honest. Even though some people might not abide to them, I feel like those are the general values that we abide by, or at least try to abide by.
What is considered acceptable in your culture
In terms of what?
in terms of any aspects that you value the most in your culture? Like what's kind of what's not acceptable and what's acceptable in your culture for an outsider to do or a person within your culture.
Um, I think unacceptable things in my culture would be um, one of them would be homosexuality. I feel like that's very taboo in my country. Um, and I'm only bringing this up because I just remember like the other lecture that we had. Um, yeah, I think that those are very taboo things. Yeah. Um, Another thing, just drugs. I think that we just have like a negative stereotype towards drugs. We don't we don't really mess with that. And just like earthly things, if that's the way that I can word it, just things that aren't of a holy nature. Since I said that, we base like our interactions and what we do on Christian values. So I feel, yeah.
So do you believe at some point those aspects will change in your culture? I mean, you talked about them being against people that have certain values in terms of them wanting to be part of a certain society.
For progress in that regard on Facebook, even though it's just social media, I feel like people are now becoming more aware. Those are, and like before, people were just scared to speak out because they were scared of the ramifications of what would happen. But I feel now that the world in itself, and not just in Zimbabwe, but you'll see like on Twitter, a lot of people outside, actually speaking out towards homophobic behaviors, and I feel like that's sort of brushing off um, to Zimbabwe as well, and we're becoming more aware that we actually do have rights, well, those that are for the movement, anyways. And I feel like, yeah, sooner or later, like we just gonna have to accept it because that's how it is.
What is social justice and how significant is it to your culture?
Uh, we're a very fair people, or at least we try to be a very fair people. Um, so in that regard, I would say that our culture is very for social justice. Um, yeah, I think that also you'd also have to be aware of the demographic as well um, of people. Um, I know that I can't tell you an exact definition, but then I know that it has elements to do with fairness, I guess,
Hmm.
elements of equity and equality, if I'm right. Yes.
Yes,
No.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't give you like an exact definition, but I know like the elements that are involved within social justice.
How do our cultural perspectives as individuals and um, influence our behaviors in society?
Cultures. Uh, in terms of our culture, culture is how we've been brought up, like how we do things. I think that if you grow up in an environment where it has nurtured you to think in a certain way or act in a certain way, then you're bound to follow that. Even as you grow up, in your interactions, in your relationships, and the way that you just carry yourself about as a normal human being. I feel.
How was your adjustment from your culture to the Australian culture?
Um, uh, that's a good question. Um, Sorry. Uh, in terms of the culture itself, I would say that certain aspects were the same. Just one thing I would say is that like when you come here, like a lot of things are different. And I might not per se comment about the culture, but I'll say that the dressing here it's definitely different from how people dress back home. And I guess that's a play in culture. I would say because yeah, it's more Western here. Can I say Western? It's more Western here. Um, and I also feel like even though like it is Western here, like we also have like sort of Western clothing within Zimbabwe as well. So I think that it's more of the degree of Westernism um, in culture. Yeah. Also, um, not to ask you a question, but when you talk about like in terms of the culture, which aspect are you talking about exactly? Uh,
What I mean by culture perspectives, basically, I mean that, in terms of dress code or, you know what I'm saying, or behavior and things like that, of that nature, um, how do
oh
they
yeah, yeah.
influence?
I think that a lot of people in Australia they're very outspoken, or maybe that's just me. Um, Maybe I just haven't like been around a lot of Zimbabweans to notice. But I think people here they really speak up their mind, and I think that it also has to do with the play of the freedom to say what you want within a space. Because I noticed that like in my country, there are not a lot of spaces to freely say what you want to say, as in to really express yourself. But here, you know, you can freely express yourself. You can, you know, you can say what you want, how you want.
What values do you hold the most from your culture?
Um, One value. I think just being humble. I feel, yeah, yeah, being in the role will really humble you in the way that you act and just carry yourself. Mm.
What is the appropriate age to get married in your culture?
Um, I think it would have to be where you're financially stable to actually look after yourself. But I think also uh, different classes may view marriage um, differently. For example, I for sure know that people that have been educated, or not even just educated, or people that how can I put this in a way? People that are more established, you know, in that regard, will say that, you know, like you have to get married like when you're financially stable, when you can actually take care of yourself. Um, in that regard, I'm not sure about the other end of the spectrum. That might be the case as well.
How are women treated in your culture?
Treated my culture. In what regard? Like in what scenario?
In terms of like human rights, like fairness, and also like after marriage, like how do you feel that women in your culture have the same opportunities as men, or do you feel like women are restricted to do certain things in your culture?
Mm, yeah. Um. Well, speaking from a student's perspective, obviously, because I haven't gotten married, so I can't give an accurate answer. But I think I would have to say is that um, most most women are sort of expected to stay at home. Um, I guess, and the the guys be the breadwinners. Um, but like I said, I think that also it you know it also has to do with also social classes because you'll find that you know other people within different demographics women will want to empower themselves to also be the breadwinners of themselves or even become independent in the way that they do things. So yeah, I think we try and respect women though in my country. Well, most of the time. Anyway, that's what I think. Yeah.
How important is education in your culture?
education. Oh, education is very important. Well, at least from the place that I grew up. Yeah, education is very important. Um, I think that my family just generally just believes in being educated. You know, get your get your finish high school, get your degree, start working. Um, yeah.
Do you feel that your culture has certain aspects that in Australia that they can adapt to at some point, or they can maybe consider to have them in their daily lives?
Could you please rephrase that question?
So do you think some of your aspects in your culture
Can be borrowed over
can be brought over into the
into
Australian
Australian culture.
culture? Yeah.
I can't say for sure. Um, certain aspects.
And what is
Maybe just humbleness.
humbleness? Okay.
But then again, I feel like I have come across like some Australians who are humble.
Hmm.
But I think that it also just has to do with like the environment that you're in, because obviously Australia is more established and whatnot. But me coming from a less established country, I feel more humbled. So in that regard, like I have met Australians that are humble.
When did you become aware of your culture identity?
When I then see that I'm not actually a Zimbabwean. Um, to be honest, like I've actually never really thought of that because I've just really just been brought up into the culture, so it's really hard to say. I think that when I did move here, I started to sort of like know myself like a bit more because of the difference. So I could say that I'm Zimbabweans because I have certain thoughts about certain things, perspectives. I view things in a different way, um, ideas and whatnot. So I think it's gonna have to be like when I had to compare other cultures, like where I became aware that okay, I'm Zimbabwean, but it's really hard to say like if you've just been brought up within the actual culture and say, ah, this is my culture. So yeah.
Like in terms of your culture, right? So what are you? I'll let you drink the water first.
No, I'm aware. You can ask me questions. Sorry.
Yeah, so in your culture,
Yeah.
is it acceptable for you to marry someone from another culture?
Um. Yeah, I think so. Well, at least I think my mom's cool with it. I do know that although like we don't prohibit, like it's we don't have like a law like look you have to marry within your culture. I think it's more or less like encouraged that you marry someone who's from Zimbabwe, but it's not forced upon you like you have to do it. I think it's more like encouraged like here like with a hint or something, something very passive, but I don't think that, well, at least in my family anyways, it could just be different from for anyone else's family within Zimbabwe, but that's what I think.
Is dowry a very big factor?
Oh, Lobola, yeah, yeah, that's definitely like a factor. Yeah, mm. You have to, um, you have to pay. Um, but since like you brought up like marrying someone from like a different culture, I'm not sure if that would apply necessarily, but I know that it would definitely apply if you're marrying a person who's from Zimbabwe.
What's considered manly in your culture?
Manly, mm,
Is it whether you have an education? Is it because
oh
of certain
yeah, I think
aspects?
I think I think it's just like if you've established yourself, I think that that's well, at least in my perspective, that's like a manly trait. Be the provider within the family as a man. Anyways, I think that those are manly features. Yeah, yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
By you seeing the Australian culture, do you feel that the Australian culture has some very great aspects that you consider that you would apply to if you had to maybe get married one day or things like that of that nature.
Oh yeah. Since we just talked about like the whole marriage thing, I think that here within Australia, like it's more widely accepted that the guy doesn't necessarily have to be the provider within the family. You
Hmm.
know, like I think that it's very lenient that it can be the girl, even though there might be some that say no, it has to be the man who provides. But I think that it's more open to those type of situations. Just openness in general. I remember I did talk about just being open with interactions and just expressing yourself. I feel like here it's a lot more openness. Think outside the box. Yeah, I don't think that a lot of people within Zimbabweans are very open to those type of things. Um, well, at least from my perspective, anyway. I could be wrong.
In terms of language, did you ever face any discrimination from like the Australian community?
Oh yeah. Well, not discrimination. I wouldn't call it discrimination per se. Um, some people like they'll go, you speak so well. Like I'm supposed to speak like in a different way or something. I think that there's just like there's just like an assumption because I'm like African. I shouldn't be able to speak proper English or like I shouldn't be able to speak English at all. But and I'm not sure if that's just like discrimination per se. I think that that's just like um, something that people just assume. Maybe it's not like out of intent to make someone feel bad, but it's just something that just happens that, oh, I thought that you're African, so you couldn't speak English. So I wouldn't call that discrimination per se, but just that. That's the closest thing that I can think of, anyways. No, yeah.
Do you believe that your culture is a very open culture in terms of are they willing to adjust to what other cultures have,
All culture willing to accept.
accept here, and adjust to other cultures?
Um, I don't think so.
Like in terms of like food, language, like
Oh yeah,
yeah.
nah, yeah. I think that like in terms of food, I mean we have like Asian restaurants. I'm not sure if that even counts as like adopting people's cultures but I mean we have that. Um French is taught at some schools, so that's accepting language, I guess. Um Awareness of that, the different languages and cultures and it should be important to be taught in schools. Um yeah.
You earlier mentioned about dress code, so what's considered acceptable to dress in your culture? I mean, for women, for instance.
For women.
Yeah.
I think just dressing modestly, you know, just dressing modestly. I think that that's like a thing in in my country to dress modestly. Um, yeah, like I said, I think that this also goes back to the Christian values that people just have in my country to dress modestly, just carry yourself appropriately. Um, yeah,